This brings back all the nostalgia for me, back to a time when I was a wee young lad starting this YouTube channel. I was using the GH4, and it was the camera that I shot some of my first biggest travel films. Then the GH5 came out, and that's what I shot my last weddings with. It was incredible. And now we have the GH6. And Panasonic decided to completely redo the insides. It's a brand new, never been used sensor. Let me read you some specs. We have 5.7K up to 60 frames per second, PRORES video, 25 megapixel sensor, 7.5 stops of IBIS. That's nuts. 120 frames per second in 4K, 240 frames per second in 1080. Wide dynamic range, which I'm curious to test out. Is the feature any good? 100 megapixel photos with a trick, all for a decent price of $2,899. Still a lot of money, but more affordable than a lot of other cameras. So what's the catch? Well, it's a micro 4/3 sensor, which is even smaller than an APS-C size sensor, and you can definitely hold on. Of course, there's no battery. Look at that size difference. This is a full frame sensor, and that's a micro 4/3. There's a big difference, but also some advantages. So it's a 2x crop. So if you're putting on like this lens, an 8 to 18 mil, that's a 2x crop. So it's actually basically like a 16 to 35 mil on a full frame camera. Look at the size difference. That is like huge difference. That's a full frame 16 to 35, micro 4/3 16 to 35. So that's one of the big upsides to micro 4/3 is that the lenses and gear are all a lot smaller and also cheaper in general. Also, because it is a lot smaller, the stabilization can also be crazier, and that is what I'm really curious about. So let's do some testing. We'll talk more about the downsides and the upsides of micro 4/3. Time to test this bad boy. Oh, spilled some club soda. Tyler, can you help test this camera?
Sure. Need my modeling?
Yeah, we need your face.
Probably the better model, but
No,
sure.
I'm good, you go.
You guys can battle it out. Who wants to model? Okay, I'm gonna finish off this video filming on the GH6. Tyler did a great job modeling. How does this sound? I hope this audio is decent. Can I just first off say how good waveform is? Every camera should have waveform. You can literally pick up any camera, be completely new to it, and when you have waveform, you can see exactly how you're exposing it. Histogram, absolute garbage. Waveform, incredible. Vector scope is great too. First off, the body, it seems pretty decent. Picked it up, feels pretty good in the hands. It's a little bit bigger than a Sony, I would say, but it's also not heavy at all. And interestingly, it's not just a flip LCD screen, it's also one of those like very angles, so everyone gets what they want. If you want just one of those tilty screens, you got it. If you want to flip out, you got it. This image, I think it looks pretty good. I was very impressed. I really like the colors. It's definitely a different look than a full frame sensor, but not bad at all. I really liked it. The colors were just so easy to work with, and then of course you got PRORES, so it's really easy to color grade. It has a really cinematic feel to it. Now, I tried to film in 5.7K 60 frames per second, and it says the footage is 60 frames per second, but when I slow it down, yeah, that's not 60 frames per second. So I think there's some sort of like pre-production firmware bug. I assume this camera will be able to do that 5.7K in 60 frames per second. Right now it's more like 42 frames per second or something like that. I'm not seeing a huge difference between the PRORES and non-PRORES footage, but it's really nice to have PRORES. It's just so easy to edit with. And again, for color grading, really nice. I think every camera should have PRORES. Forget RAW. PRORES is the way to go. Attention to the autofocus as I'm doing all this like vlogging, talking, because that has been one of the big issues. So let's address that. The dynamic range boost mode is pretty interesting. You can definitely see a difference, especially in the face here, in Tyler's face. You can see a difference. It's not a drastic difference, but it is doing something, some sort of camera magic to give you more dynamic range, which computational photography, I'm down for it. It does put the base ISO up to 2000, which could be an issue in some cases. And it doesn't work in all frame rates, but it does work in PRORES, so that's pretty nice. 120 frames per second in 4K looked great. Even the 240 frames per second in 1080 was pretty nice in my opinion. No autofocus though, which is a bit of a bummer, and we'll talk about autofocus in just a second. Everything was shot handheld, and look at these gimbal-like shots. They're pretty dang good. The IBIS is quite good on this camera. Not perfect, it never is. Gimbal is definitely still better, but for like run and gun wedding shooting documentaries, this is incredible. Less wobbles than something like the R5, that's for sure. I was really trying to like get to wobble here. Still some wobbling, some like wonkiness going on, but not nearly as bad, and I think this is actually totally usable. Probably one of my favorite things about the whole Panasonic GH line is that IBIS. It's so good that I was able to ditch the monopod at weddings because it was stable enough with just the IBIS, and I could even get away with most shots not using something like a gimbal. Let's be honest, I never used gimbals ever in a wedding. I had a little like Steadicam. No high-tech stuff for me. Micro Four Thirds cameras are notoriously good for IBIS, and that's because it's a smaller sensor, so when you're moving it around, it doesn't get all crazy and warpy. So that okay, that was interesting. It just stopped recording and said that it needed to like write the data to the card, even though I'm using a crazy fast CF Express A, the one that the Canons use. Very fast card, but for some reason in 5.7K PRORES, it needed to stop recording for a little bit. Might be an issue for some people if you're doing long clips. Like I was saying, IBIS on Micro Four Thirds is really good because the sensor is so small, and so you're not getting that crazy wobbles. That's one of the best things about the Micro Four Thirds sensor, especially if you put on a zoom lens. It's nuts how stable it is. Now, one of the reasons why I switched away from the GH line of cameras was that autofocus, and I want to say it's gotten a lot better. It's still contrast based, but I think you can actually use this now, and it's not absolutely horrendous like the GH5 was. So overall good. I'm sure it could be better. I'm sure there's going to be times when it's not going to be very good, but overall pretty decent. I think we have what's called freezing rain every once in a while, where it's rain that comes down, but then it freezes right away. Oh, now it looks like it's snowing. So I'm gonna continue this review on the road because I don't feel like dying out there. Have a good day. What is this weather? I was gonna say that the Micro Four Thirds cameras aren't really the best for photos, but actually looking back at the photos, they're not bad. Pretty good. I wouldn't be complaining. And this camera is kind of interesting. It can actually do some camera magic where it's only a 25 megapixel sensor, but because that stabilization is so good, you can take 100 megapixel photo with it with, you know, camera magic. There's tons of other great features on the GH6. Did I just say fix? I meant 6. I feel like the GH line is one of those cameras where they just like pack in everything. You have like so many different options of codecs and recording options and all of this stuff, color profiles, including things like you can load in your own LUTs, so you can actually be monitoring with your look LUT, which I absolutely love. It sounds like a small thing, but if you're DPing, that's like the ultimate. Seeing it like it's kind of gonna turn out after your color grading versus just looking at a log image or even a Rec 709, it instantly makes you feel like, man, I'm such a good filmmaker. There's been so many times where I've been DPing and looking through a LUT and I'm like, man, this footage looks incredible already as I'm filming it. So LUTs are a great thing. Okay, I'm gonna start driving now. I'm gonna try and pay attention to the road, you know. I'll be back. Classic nice dad.
I can see how my bones moving.
Do you like the camera, Kai?
Yeah, I like it.
Is this one better or worse than the others?
This is better because it has one light.
Oh, you like the light? And you can tell that it's recording. It's pretty handy, right? Yeah, right, Coco. One of the other benefits of Micro Four Thirds is...
I can hold it.
Okay, why don't you film me and I'll talk.
Okay.
Okay. You have to... There, can you see me?
Yeah?
Make sure you can see my face, okay? So Micro Four Thirds has other benefits, for example, anamorphic shooting. Because the sensor is more like square rather than APS-C and full frame is more like horizontal rectangle, you can actually use the whole sensor basically for anamorphic shooting, and there's anamorphic modes built into the camera. Really great. Also, are you okay, Kai? Yeah. Camera seems to be slumping a little bit. Also, in general, Micro Four Thirds is smaller, weighs less, and it's cheaper. Not just the camera, but also the lenses and everything are much smaller and more affordable. Yeah, okay, you hold it like that. Okay. Okay. No, you have to hold it up. Is it heavy?
How about you put it like this?
Can I hire you to film my videos already?
Okay.
Okay, so the question is, who is this camera for? And I think it's actually a pretty versatile camera. It's one of those cameras where you get like all of the options. It's great for indie shooters, for indie filmmakers, whether you want to make like a short film or documentary or you're shooting weddings, anything like that, super good. And I think it can actually work as a YouTube camera now also, whereas the GH5s I definitely wouldn't have recommended for YouTube, but I think it works. You just want to play with the camera, huh? So overall, very impressed with the GH6. It's a great camera. I think you will enjoy it. Okay, I'm gonna go play with these kids now. Oh, I'm gonna go play with these kids now. I'll see you guys later. Bye. Kai, what's your YouTube channel gonna be about?
It's going to be about like doing like work, like homeschool work.
Oh, homeschool work? Nice. It's a good channel. It's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Coco, are you gonna do YouTube too?
Nice.